If I told you this video was about a failing wrestling dream, a random shopping mall in upstate New York, an impromptu magician's career, and a ventriloquist dummy, would you believe it was too strange to be true? Well, when you're in the Smoky Mountains, not even AI can create something this strange. So keep listening to learn how all these unlikely twists came together to create one of the most unique entertainment venues in the area. Welcome to Bear Facts, where we explore the Smoky Mountains one bear fact at a time. Welcome to our channel, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to explore a seriously funny and unique show in Sevierville, Tennessee, a place just one red light away from Pigeon Forge. It's called Impossibilities, and it's a one-man act show that really takes you for a mental spin while keeping you hanging. If you're familiar with the area, you might have even seen his name or billboard, and that's because it was one of the longest running shows in Gatlinburg. It was actually in the Space Needle for 8 years running. And the genius or madman behind the show is Erik Dobell, an aspiring wrestler and connoisseur of all contemporary cartoons. But aspiring magician, not so much. But I'll explain that later. We first saw Impossibilities in Sevierville, never having had the time to actually see it when it was in the Space Needle in Gatlinburg. We ended up booking tickets for a February show and were impressed with the entire show and setup. By the time we left, I already had some great footage and figured I'd put together a video about our visit. It was a good show, and I love supporting independent business ventures. But what surprises was what happened next. Only about a week later, Erik actually reached out to our channel and asked if we'd like to come and see the show. Maybe even give a short interview for our channel. The thing is that Dobell had no idea that we'd already been to a show. I don't advertise when I come to visit places. I just show up and take footage and then leave. So him contacting us out of the blue was beyond crazy, and we just couldn't pass by the opportunity to learn more about him. Now, one of the things that stood out to us when we had actually seen the show the first time was when Erik was talking about his history and life. And during the show, Erik does explain how his passion for magic started in a mall in Ithaca, New York. Now, at the time, me and my husband shot each other a look and just chuckled because not only did we know about the town that he was talking about, but we actually knew the mall too. So the first time we sat down with Erik, we had to ask him. It was the Trip Hammer Mall, wasn't it? Because honestly, that's the only mall that is in that town right now. And of course, that quickly devolved into a whole conversation about things that we all miss from New York, like their bagels and pizza and wings. And the next thing we know, my husband and him are talking about wrestling and contemporary and, of course, older style cartoons. Before you knew it, we hadn't even said anything or interviewed him at all about his actual life. And we needed to stop and get back on track at that point. It does say something about Erik, about how down to earth he is, that when you're talking with him, it just feels like you're talking with an old friend rather than sitting across from a person you'd actually only met once or twice in your entire life. So once we got back on track, I did go ahead and ask Erik a couple questions. And of course, the first one was to elaborate a little bit more on his beginning story, I guess. I mean, how did he become a magician? How did he get interested in it? And yes, he does cover this during the show, but I was curious, is there anything to the story he doesn't usually talk about? And yeah, there is. So Erik went back in and re-explained his entire story. The first thing to note is that Erik did not come from a magician's family or was begging his parents as an early child to bury him in the backyard in a shark tank while he tries to escape. No, he had much worse plans than that. He wanted to become a pro wrestler. A magic trick for sure for a guy that topped out at 5 foot 5 inches. And well, without the exact physique of Hulk Hogan either. But the ironies didn't stop there. In fact, Erik's journey into magic started because of a random encounter at a shopping mall in upstate New York. There was a vendor at the mall that was selling magic tricks, and Erik bought a bunch of them, went home, fiddled with them, really loved the idea of it and became passionate about magic. He's like, okay, I'm going to go back to the mall and go see this guy and talk to him and see what he knows. Maybe he can share some secrets with me. Well, Erik went back to the same mall and to the same vendor, and instead of selling magic tricks, he was selling sunglasses. And that was that. Erik's like, what? What happened? And the guy's like, sorry, I had some overstock magic stuff. This guy didn't know anything about magic. He just had a little overstocked items and was selling them at the mall the very day that Erik went through. If he had gone another day, Erik would have had a brand new pair of sunglasses and nothing else with his life going on, because without that encounter in the random mall in upstate New York, Erik's passion for magic most likely wouldn't have happened. Should we call it fate or magic? I don't know. I'll let you decide. Now, regardless of how his interest in magic started, Erik continued practicing and developing his skills. Eventually, he teamed up with a creative partner and began building what would become Impossibilities. Now, of course, we had to ask Erik, how did you end up in Sevierville, Tennessee? I mean, 1 minute you're talking about New York, and in your show you're talking about Korea. How did you end up here, of all places? So Erik continued to tell his strange, convoluted story of how he got to the Smoky Mountains. Now, Erik and his partner had continued to develop a proof of concept of Impossibilities at the same time that Erik was exploring other possible careers in his life. One thing he was interested in was actually becoming an actor. And Erik had even managed to get a role in a pilot show from one of the major networks. He was very excited about this possibility in his life. But then, of course, the network pulled the plug and the whole show and all of his plans went down the drain. After that crushing TV show derailed his plans, his wife, a teacher in North Carolina, accepted an opportunity to teach overseas in South Korea. Without any solid plans right now in the States, Erik decided to go with the flow and packed all of his stuff and went to South Korea. Now in my head, I'm thinking, wait, you were in upstate New York and then all of a sudden you were in Korea and now you're here in Sevierville, Tennessee. How did that come about? And of course I asked him, I said, Erik, how did you end up here? This is a random place for you to be. Well, he explained next is that he actually has family in the area. Well, kind of in the area, down in Asheville. Anyway, he was looking online and he saw that there was a magic and mentalist show performing inside the Gatlinburg Space Needle. Being curious, he decided to attend. And that's when everything changed. Because the performer who had been appearing there apparently pulled their own magic act and up and disappeared basically overnight. Now, most people would be disappointed and turn away and say, okay, move on to the next thing. But instead, Erik thought of this as an opportunity. He contacted the owners of the Space Needle and said, hey, I have a show called Impossibilities, and believe it or not, it's a magic and mentalist show. Would you like to lease me a space? In 2016, he launched Impossibilities in the Gatlinburg Space Needle. Now, our next question was, of course, about the name. It's a good name, and we wanted to know if there was a story behind it. It turns out that the answer wasn't nearly as complicated as some of Erik's mind-reading tricks are, but it was also interesting as well. So when Erik and his original creative partner were developing the show, they wanted a name that captured the feeling of what they were trying to create. A show filled with moments that seemed impossible, yet were happening right in front of your eyes. The name Impossibilities just fit, right? And the name and show was, however, so good that other performers decided to start borrowing some of the act, without their permission, of course, including the name Impossibilities. According to Erik, another performer in the UK eventually began using the same name in their show. And yet there was another person who borrowed their font and another performer who actually stole part of his act. I suppose that's one way to measure success, right? When people start copying what you're doing. It usually means you're doing something right? Anyway, another sign of its success was how long the show did run in the Gatlinburg Space Needle. It ran for 8 consecutive years and was highly successful. But then there was another major hurdle. The owners of the Space Needle decided they needed more room for arcade games. Yeah, I know. The theater he was using was closed, and the escape room attraction in the basement was now shown the door. Erik found himself competing with skee balls and claw machines for real estate, and unfortunately, the claw machines won. And Erik was faced with a challenge that every performer dreads: finding a new stage. But the show must go on, and if by now you didn't see that Erik is a very optimistic person, I think you have missed most of my video. Anyway, Erik needed to find a new venue. Luck or fate, he found one in Sevierville, Tennessee, and started his act again in 2025, just off the Parkway. Now, the new venue is in a location at 1548 Parkway in Sevierville, Tennessee. It's not technically Pigeon Forge, but close enough, and it's directly in front of Dave & Buster's. Not only does this new location have plenty of free parking, but it has easy access from the Parkway, and once people realize where he moved, the possibilities are endless at this location. Now, while the building itself might seem unassuming from the outside, don't let that fool you. Some of the best experiences in the Smoky Mountains aren't found in giant theaters with hundreds of seats, but in smaller venues. Today, Erik is essentially a one-man operation. He's the one greeting guests as they arrive, selling tickets, helping people find their seats, selling concessions, answering questions, selling magic tricks, managing the business, and then a few minutes later, he is walking onto the stage and performing as if he hadn't been running around handling everything behind the scenes for the last half hour. Oh, and did I mention he also has a podcast? Yep, this one-man show is also involved in What's Up Gatlinburg, a podcast he co-hosts with Mike Fowler. Both men live and operate businesses in the Smoky Mountain area. The podcast focused on what is happening in the town, local events, and conversations with other residents, business owners, and personalities from across the Smoky Mountain region. But enough about Erik's story. Let's talk about the show itself. So I wanted to give some fair warning to those introverts out there. This show is not one of those sit back and watch kind of production. It really involves the audience, and their participation is a major part of the experience. So, depending on your personality, that statement is really either exciting or absolutely terrifying. So if you're outgoing, you're probably going to spend the entire show hoping Erik picks on you. However, if you're like my husband, you do everything you can to avoid eye contact because you do not want to be picked. Fortunately, Erik is incredibly good at reading the room, so if you'd rather observe than participate, just let him know ahead of time when you're checking in, and he'll happily focus his attention to someone else who's making eye contact. But it is the audience participation and Erik's quick wit that makes this show truly unique. Sure, the magic and mentalism is mind-boggling, but it's the combination of humor, audience participation, and Erik's ability to think on his feet that sets the show apart. Now, after seeing the show twice now, I truly feel that the key to his success is his ability to just go with the flow. Every show ends up a little different too, and honestly, that's where the funniest moments happen. People say things you just don't expect. They react in ways nobody can predict, and sometimes they completely derail what you think is about to happen. Yet somehow, Erik always manages to roll with it and turn it into part of the show. Those are serious skills that you can't fake, and after watching enough live entertainment in the Smokies, I've learned just how valuable they are. Another thing I appreciate is that the show is genuinely family-friendly. Kids enjoy it, parents enjoy it, grandparents enjoy it. There aren't many shows that are multiple generations that can sit together and, leave equally entertained. But this is one of them. Now, for those of you with a good memory, you might have remembered that I started this video by talking about a failed wrestling dream, a random shopping mall in upstate New York, an accidental magician's career, and a ventriloquist dummy. So where does that last part fit into this story? Well, it turns out that Erik has recently begun collaborating with a dummy. Yes, a real dummy. One of those creepy ventriloquist dummies with the hinged mouth, soulless eyes, and toothy smile that makes you double check the back seat of your car before driving home. It is a large empty parking lot. Now, maybe it's because I'm an 80s kid, but I grew up during the golden age of scary movies featuring dolls with bad attitudes and questionable intentions. So let's just say ventriloquist dummies and I have never been on the best terms. In all seriousness, though, Erik has started working with another talented local entertainer, Buford, who's part of a variety act at the Array Variety Show across the street. And we've actually seen Buford perform, and while his dummies are every bit as creepy as I described, he is also incredibly funny, talented, and the perfect fit for the type of unique entertainment venue that Erik is bringing to Sevierville. So if you're looking for something different the next time you're in the Smokies, consider giving Impossibilities a try. Because after hearing Erik's story, I've come to realize that the real impossibility isn't the mind reading or the magic tricks or even the creepy ventriloquist dummy. It's how a kid with a wrestling dream had a chance encounter in a shopping mall and a series of unlikely twists somehow turn into one of the most unique shows in the Smoky Mountains. And honestly, that's what makes Erik's story an impossibility worth believing in. I hope this video helps you plan your visit to the Smokies. You're getting an honest review from our personal experiences, but facts and things change, so please keep us in the loop if you learn anything new and want to share your experiences in the comments. Thanks again for visiting us at Bear Facts of the Smoky Mountains. Please click that like button and subscribe to our channel.